There are words that, if a child were brave enough to say them out loud, perhaps so many families would no longer feel so distant from one another. But most children never say them, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have quietly asked themselves one small question over and over again. If I tell them, will anyone truly understand? There are children who laugh all day at school, yet the moment they get home, they become silent the rest of the evening. There are children who always say, I'm okay, while their hearts are carrying far more than a child should ever have to carry. There are children who grow up in families that seem to have everything, yet they still carry loneliness with them for years. The saddest part is that most of these distances do not begin with one major event. They are built from thousands of tiny moments. A moment when a parent answers absent-mindedly. A moment spent looking at a phone instead of looking at their child. A moment of rushing to judge instead of listening. A moment of believing, they're still young, they'll forget. But children do not forget the way adults think they do. They do not remember every word. They remember how they felt, the feeling of being hugged, the feeling of being overlooked, the feeling of being important, and the feeling of not being important enough for someone to stop and truly listen for just a few minutes. There is a truth that many parents only realize after their children have grown up. What children need most in their early years is not a bigger house, not more toys, not expensive classes. What they remember for the rest of their lives is often something much smaller. A look, a hug, an evening when the whole family simply sat together and talked. A moment when their parents said, "You don't seem very happy today. We're here to listen." Those are the memories that create a deep sense of safety. And if your child could tell you everything they have been hiding inside today, that conversation might leave many parents completely speechless. The very first thing your child might say is, "Please don't only notice my results. Notice how hard I tried to get there." Adults often look at grades, a test, a competition, a diploma, an achievement. Then they decide whether a child is doing well. But children live in a completely different world. Some days, simply walking into the classroom already feels like a challenge. Some days, even raising a hand to answer a question takes tremendous courage. Some children spend hours trying to understand a single math problem, yet they still cannot solve it, not because they are lazy, but because every brain develops at its own pace. When a child brings home a test with a score that falls short of expectations, the first thing they look at is not the paper. It is their parent's face. If the first expression they see is disappointment, they begin to believe that their worth changes with every number on that page. If the first expression they see is care, they learn that they are still loved, even when they are not perfect. There is a world of difference between these two questions. Why did you only get this score? And, you must have worked really hard today, didn't you? Only one question changes, but everything changes inside a child's heart. Many studies in developmental psychology show that children do not become confident because they succeed all the time. They become confident because the people who matter most stay beside them after they fail. Failure itself is not what children fear. What they fear is being loved a little less after they fail. A child who grows up feeling accepted becomes willing to try, willing to make mistakes, willing to learn, willing to begin again. On the other hand, a child who is only praised for winning gradually learns to avoid anything that might lead to failure. Eventually, they stop chasing what they truly love. They only chase the places where they know they will be accepted. That is not confidence. That is fear, disguised as perfection. And sadly, many parents only realize this after their child has already grown up. The second thing so many children wish they could say, but rarely ever do, is, "Please don't guess how I feel. Ask me." Adults often believe they understand their children. After all, they gave birth to them. They raised them. They know what they like to eat, what time they sleep, what they are afraid of. But understanding a 5-year-old child does not mean you automatically understand that same child at 12, or 16, or 20. People change every single day. Children do too. Sometimes your child becomes unusually quiet. Parents assume they are being stubborn, when in reality, they may simply be worried because they feel left out by their friends. Sometimes your child becomes angry. Parents think they are being disrespectful, while inside, they are quietly wondering whether they are good enough. Sometimes your child wants to be alone. Parents quickly decide that they are lazy or distant. But the truth is, they are simply trying to sort through emotions they do not yet understand themselves. Sometimes adults react to behavior, when the real story is hidden underneath it. Behavior is only the tip of the iceberg. What truly matters is always below the surface. A child who lashes out may actually be deeply hurt. A child who stays silent may simply be longing for a hug. A child who laughs all the time may be carrying more pressure than anyone realizes. If parents only try to correct the behavior without trying to understand what caused it, they may unknowingly miss what their child has been trying to say all along. There is one simple question, yet it carries more power than countless pieces of advice. What happened today that made you feel this way? Not to investigate, not to judge, simply to understand. When a child is asked that question with genuine curiosity instead of suspicion, their brain slowly begins to learn that their feelings matter, that they do not have to hide everything. That home is still a place where they can safely be themselves. That is one of the greatest gifts parents can ever give a child, not because it solves every problem, but because from that moment on, the child no longer has to face those problems alone. Sometimes, the moment that changes a child's life forever is not a long conversation. It is simply having one person patient enough to ask, "Would you like to tell me more?" There is something that very few adults ever realize. Children do not only learn from what their parents teach, they learn from how their parents live. You can tell your child that kindness is important, but if every day they see you raising your voice at a waiter, speaking badly about other people behind their backs, or treating those with less power without respect, your child will believe what they see, not what they hear. You can teach your child to be honest, but if they often hear you say, "Just tell them we're not home," or "It's easier this way," then the lesson they remember will be completely different. That is why children often grow up becoming like their parents in ways their parents never intended. They learn emotional control by watching how adults handle their own emotions. They learn how to love by watching how their parents love each other. They learn how to apologize by seeing whether anyone in the family is brave enough to admit they were wrong. And they learn self-respect from the way their parents respect themselves. That is why a child who grows up in an ordinary family filled with kindness often carries those values for the rest of their life. Not because someone forced them to remember, but because they lived inside those values every single day. Maybe that is why your child wants to tell you, "I don't need perfect parents. I need consistent parents." Don't hold your child tightly today, then make them feel like a burden tomorrow because of one small mistake. Don't tell them today that they can always talk to you, only to criticize them the moment they finally open their heart. Children need consistency more than perfection. They need to know that home is always a safe place. That whether they get a high grade today or a low one, whether they succeed or fail, whether they are cheerful or upset, their parents will still be the place they can come back to. That creates emotional security. And emotional security becomes the foundation of confidence later in life. There is a quote worth remembering. A child does not need to know how talented they are. They need to know they always belong somewhere. That is what builds inner strength. Not constant pressure, not overwhelming expectations, but the quiet belief that no matter what happens, our family is still here. There is another truth many parents overlook. Sometimes what hurts a child is not what their parents say, it is what they never say. Some children grow up for years without ever hearing one very simple sentence. "We're proud of you," not because they do not deserve to hear it, but because their parents assume they already know, or because they worry too much praise will make them complacent. But children cannot read the minds of adults. If love is only kept inside, a child may grow up constantly wondering, "Am I good enough? Are my parents really proud of me?" Many adults spend their entire lives trying to prove their worth, not because they are ambitious, but because deep inside, there is still a child searching for words of approval they never received. Sometimes one sentence, spoken at the right moment, stays with a child forever. "You don't have to become the best to make us proud," or "Thank you for being exactly who you are." Those words do not make children weak. They do the opposite. They help build lasting self-respect. A child who knows they are loved will never have to spend a lifetime chasing approval from everyone else, and that is a priceless gift. Next comes something that seems very small, yet it can completely shape the way a child sees themselves. It is how parents respond when their child makes a mistake. There are two kinds of families. In the first family, when a glass falls to the floor, the very first words are, "Why were you so careless?" In the second family, the very first words are, "Did you hurt your hand?" The glass is broken in both homes. But the memory the child carries is completely different. One memory teaches the child that mistakes make them a problem. The other teaches them that they matter more than any object. Over time, these small experiences quietly shape the way a child treats themselves. If every mistake is met with criticism, the child grows up carrying an inner voice that never stops judging. Every time they fail, that voice returns. "I'm useless. I can't do anything right." But if every mistake is treated as an opportunity to learn, the child begins to understand that failure does not define their worth. It is simply part of growing, and perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons a parent can ever give. There is something deeply ironic about parenthood. Parents spend their entire lives preparing their children for the future. Yet, without realizing it, they sometimes miss their child's present. We worry about which school they will attend, what career they will choose, whether they will earn enough money, whether they will become more successful than others. None of those questions are wrong. Every parent hopes their child will have a good life. But there is another question that very few parents ever ask themselves. Is my child happy today? A child's happiness does not always come from extraordinary things. Sometimes it is simply a family dinner, an evening when someone asks how their day went, a short walk after the meal, or just a few quiet minutes before bedtime when they know they have their parents' complete attention. Childhood memories are not built through luxurious vacations. They are built through ordinary moments repeated over and over again. Because a child's brain does not store life like a movie. It stores feelings. Years later, your child may forget the gift you once bought them, forget their very first phone, forget their favorite outfit. But they will remember falling asleep in their father's arms. They will remember their mother's smile when they proudly showed a drawing they had just finished. They will remember evenings when the whole family talked until they lost track of time. Those tiny moments become the safest place they carry inside themselves for the rest of their lives. There are people well into their 40s who still remember being carried on their father's shoulders, or an afternoon when their mother quietly listened to their stories after school. That reminds us of something important. Children do not need as much as we think they do. They need real moments, not expensive gifts, but moments when their parents are truly present. Perhaps what your child wants to say is, "I don't need you beside me every minute. I just need you to truly be here when you are." There is a huge difference. Some families live under the same roof, yet their minds are somewhere else. At work, on a phone, reading unanswered messages, thinking about problems that still need to be solved. The child may be sitting only a few feet away, yet still feel incredibly far away. What hurts children is not that their parents are busy. It is the feeling that they always come after everything else, after work, after the phone, after phone calls, after social media, after countless things they are too young to understand. Little by little, they stop calling for their parents. Not because they no longer need them, but because they become used to handling everything alone. Many people call that maturity. Sometimes it is simply loneliness. A child does not suddenly become distant. They simply stop knocking on a door that has gone unanswered too many times. There is a story that child psychologists often share. A little boy was once asked, "What is your favorite time of the year?" People expected him to say his birthday, Christmas, or summer vacation. Instead, he gave a completely unexpected answer. "My favorite time is when my dad washes the car on the weekend." When they asked him why, he smiled and said, "Because that's the only time Dad isn't holding his phone. And I get to stand next to him and tell him everything." At first, it sounds like such an ordinary answer. But the more you think about it, the more heartbreaking it becomes. The most valuable gift in a child's eyes may simply be a few uninterrupted minutes of their parents' attention. Not half of it, all of it, because to a child, being listened to is another way of being loved. There is something else many parents unintentionally overlook: a child's right to have their own thoughts. Many families still believe, "You're too young. You don't understand. We know what's best for you." It is true that adults have more experience, but that does not mean a child's feelings or opinions have no value. A 5-year-old already has preferences. An 8-year-old already has opinions. A 15-year-old desperately needs opportunities to make their own choices. If every important decision is always made by their parents, that child usually grows into one of two kinds of adults: someone who depends on everyone else, or someone who rebels just to regain control over their own life. Neither path is truly healthy. Children do not need permission to do absolutely everything. What they need is the chance to participate in decisions that affect them. What clothes they would like to wear, which book they want to read, what sport they would like to try, how they want to organize their study space. These small decisions quietly build an enormous life skill, the ability to take responsibility for their own life. One day, your child will become an adult. No one will be there to make every decision for them. If they have never been allowed to practice, every choice will feel frightening. Perhaps what your child wants to tell you is, "Please show me the way, but don't live my life for me." Because the greatest form of love is not control. It is preparing your child so that one day they can walk on their own, while always remembering the way back home. There are children who become successful adults, yet every time they call home, their hearts still feel lighter. Not because their parents solve every problem, but because they know there will always be someone waiting on the other end of the line who believes in them. Every child deserves that feeling, and perhaps it is the greatest gift any parent can leave behind. There is a truth that many people only understand after their children have grown up. Not every distance begins with an argument. Sometimes, distance begins because both sides believe there will always be more time. Parents tell themselves, "I'll talk to my child tomorrow. This weekend we'll spend time together." When work becomes less busy, "I'll give them more attention." But childhood does not wait for anyone's schedule. It quietly moves forward, one ordinary day at a time. Then one morning, you notice the dinner table that was once full of laughter has become strangely quiet. The little child who used to follow you everywhere now stays inside their room. The endless stories they once shared have become only a few short words. I'm fine, nothing, okay. Many parents think it's just the teenage years, but sometimes it is simply the result of years spent believing that no one was really listening. Human beings naturally move toward places where they feel understood. If children cannot find that feeling at home, they will begin looking somewhere else. Maybe among friends, maybe on social media, maybe in the company of complete strangers. That does not mean their parents do not love them. It simply means the love never reached them in the way they needed. Love is not only measured by what you do, it is also measured by what the other person is able to feel. A mother may wake up before sunrise every day for her child. A father may work 12 hours a day to give their child a better life. All of that is love. But if a child has never heard words of encouragement, never experienced heartfelt conversations, never truly felt like they came first, it is very difficult for them to recognize those sacrifices while they are still young. Children simply do not have enough life experience to understand the weight adults carry. They understand something much simpler. Who makes them feel safe? Who makes them feel anxious? Who makes them feel important? That is why what children long for is not a perfect life. They simply long for a relationship where they never have to wonder whether their parents truly love them. There is one question every parent should ask themselves at least once. If I were no longer this child's parent, if I were simply another person, would my child still choose to sit down and talk with me? It is a difficult question, but it is worth asking. Because the authority of being a parent only lasts for a season. One day, the thing that keeps your child close will no longer be dependence. It will be connection. You cannot force a grown adult to call you every day, but you can become the person they naturally want to call. That relationship begins long before they become adults. It is built through thousands of conversations that seem completely ordinary. Through the way you respond when they make mistakes. Through the expression on your face whenever they walk into the room. Through whether you remember the little things they once shared with you. Some children remember those moments with incredible clarity. The first day of school. Did their parents hold their hand tightly? The first time they stood on a stage. Did they see their parents smiling proudly? The first time they failed. Did their parents hug them first or criticize them first? Those memories never truly disappear. Quietly, they become the foundation of how children see themselves. If a child grows up believing they are accepted, they will step into adulthood carrying a different kind of strength. Not because they never feel afraid, but because they know, even if the whole world turns away, there will always be one place where they belong. There is something else children rarely know how to say. I don't need my parents to have all the answers. Adults often believe they must always be strong. They must solve every problem. They must always be right. But in reality, what makes children feel closest to them is honesty. Sometimes parents can simply say, I don't know what to do either. I'm still learning to. We'll figure it out together. Those words do not make parents seem weaker. Quite the opposite. They teach children that no one has to be perfect to deserve love. No one has to know everything to be a good person. Life is not an exam where adults already have every answer. It is a journey where parents and children are learning side by side, one day at a time. When children see their parents admit they are not perfect, they also learn to be kinder to themselves. They stop being so afraid of making mistakes that they never dare to try. They stop blaming themselves every time they fail. They stop believing that their worth depends on doing everything perfectly. That gift is worth far more than any advice. Because children do not need role models without flaws. They need adults who know how to rise after making mistakes. Perhaps that is the lesson they will remember most. Not how to avoid falling, but how to treat themselves gently after they do. And if parents can give their children that lesson in the early years of life, they will carry it with them for the rest of their lives. It is a strength no one can ever take away. And then, there is one question that many parents never expect they will one day have to face. What if one day my child no longer needs me? What will make them still want to come home? Not obligation, not responsibility, not guilt, but because they genuinely want to. The answer is not found in the house you leave behind. It is not found in your savings, nor is it found in everything you sacrificed. It is found in a feeling. Does your child feel at peace whenever they think about home? Do they believe they will always be welcomed, whether they are succeeding or struggling? Do they believe they can tell you about a mistake without fearing judgment? If the answer is yes, then you have already given your child something far more valuable than money. There is something fascinating about human memory. As we grow older, we rarely remember long conversations word for word. But we remember exactly how people made us feel. An adult may forget what their parents said when they were 10 years old, but they still remember being hugged after their very first failure. They remember the proud look in their parents' eyes after accomplishing something small. They remember the laughter shared around an ordinary family dinner. That is how memory works. It does not preserve every detail. It preserves emotions, which means that every day you spend with your child is quietly becoming part of the story they will one day tell about their childhood. What kind of story will that be? Only the choices you make today can answer that question. A child was once asked, if you could make one wish for your parents, what would it be? The adults expected the child to wish for more toys, a vacation, or an expensive gift. Instead, the child quietly answered, I just wish Mom and Dad wouldn't look at their phones while I'm talking. That answer left many adults speechless, because sometimes the thing children want most is the very thing adults believe is too small to matter. We often think love has to be shown through grand gestures, but to a child, love is usually measured in the simplest ways. You remember the name of their best friend. You remember the book they love most. You remember they have a performance at school today. You remember they once told you they were afraid of the dark. Those little moments send one powerful message. You matter to us. And there is not a single child who grows up without needing to hear that message. Perhaps the saddest mistake is not that parents make mistakes. It is that so many believe it is too late to repair them. The truth is, it almost never is. The relationship between parents and children is not defined by never doing anything wrong. It is defined by what you choose to do after you have made a mistake. Do you continue staying silent, or do you take the first step toward your child? Do you keep protecting your pride, or are you willing to say, I'm sorry? Never underestimate the power of an apology from a parent. To a child, those words carry enormous meaning. They teach that love is not a battle to decide who is right and who is wrong. Love is a place where two people keep trying to understand each other a little better than they did yesterday. Many adults still remember the very first time they heard their father say, I'm sorry, not because the mistake itself was so serious, but because in that moment they realized they were being respected as a person too. Respect always comes before connection. A child who is respected learns to respect others. A child who is listened to learns how to listen. A child who is treated with kindness carries that kindness into the world. That is how healthy families are built, not in one single day, but through thousands of small choices. choosing to hold your child a few seconds longer, choosing to ask one more question, choosing to sit down instead of raising your voice, choosing to listen before reaching a conclusion, choosing to look into your child's eyes while they are speaking. Those choices may seem ordinary, but together they create an extraordinary childhood. In the end, what your child carries with them when they leave home will not only be knowledge, not only skills, and not the gifts you bought for them. The thing that stays with them the longest is the belief you planted inside their heart, the belief that they are worthy of love, the belief that they still have value even when they are not perfect, the belief that there will always be a place to return to after the hardest days of life. One day, your child will grow up. They will have their own career, their own family, their own responsibilities. You will no longer hold their hand every day. You will no longer take them to school. You will no longer hear them excitedly tell you about every little thing that happened. Time will quietly take all of those moments away. But there is one thing time can never take away: the feeling you leave inside your child's heart. If you have helped your child feel loved, respected, accepted, then, no matter where life takes them, home will always be the place they long to return to. So tonight, before another day comes to an end, try doing one very simple thing. Sit down beside your child. Put your phone away. Look into their eyes for just a little longer. Ask them a question you may not have asked in a very long time. What has been on your heart today? And when they begin to answer, do not rush to fix it. Do not rush to teach. Do not rush to give advice. Just listen, because perhaps what your child has needed all along was never a perfect answer. They only needed to know that somewhere in this world there will always be someone willing to sit beside them, listen to them, and love them exactly as they are. If you can give your child that, you will not simply be raising a child. You will be helping raise an adult who knows how to love, who knows how to trust, and who carries kindness into every life they touch. And perhaps that is the greatest success any parent could ever hope for.